Hi, I'm Beth from Around the Table Yarns. Today is Sweater Club. We are doing the front of the Wren sweater by Woolstock Design Team. Everybody's doing it in different weights, and today we're going to talk about the front and the back of the sweater are exactly the same in the pattern. However, we have some people who would like to do a different neckline, so we're going to talk about doing instead of doing a mock turtleneck, we're going to talk about putting in a V-neck. And I'm going to change so that I am pinned for everybody. You can just see me. And I'm going to switch over to my camera. I'm going to draw this little picture. I'm going to move my camera, see if I can get that way. Trying to get no shadow, but maybe there's no way to get no shadow unless I go up really high. Hello. Okay. So I'm not going to show the schematic of the sweater on, but I am going to draw a version of it. So essentially, the body of the sweater looks something like this. That looks something like your sweater. And if we were to do the neckline as written, it would come up and down like this. This would fold to create the mock neck. It would be a fold line here. And so it would look essentially like that as a finished garment. And then the sleeves are just basic sleeves that go out as a parallelogram from the shoulders. So this is half the width of the sleeve. The other half of the sleeve is folded behind. So it would actually be like that and down. So this is a very basic and really an attractive shape. And many people who are participating in this are doing it as written. But we had one person ask, could I make it a V-neck? And so I just want to talk a little bit about what it means to make something a V-neck that is written to be like this. So the first thing that you would change is you would not do this part of the instructions. You would stop your back at the top of the shaping and just leave all of the stitches on the needle. So you would omit the part of the pattern where you do the neck, so where you change to a different size needle and do this shaping set. So you would get rid of that first of all. So your back would look like this. And then you'd want to take some measurements and maybe count your rows. So you'd want to know what this measurement is of your actual finished item. And you'd want to know what the measurement was from here to here that you'd want for the neckline. We based our opening of the neck on this item as written, because that would mean that we wouldn't have to change the shoulder shaping on the front. So that might mean a slightly more open neck, but you can fill it in with ribbing as you go. I'm going to use a darker pen. I hope that makes it a little bit easier to see. So again, if this is our V-neck being created, we want to open it to the same points on the top so that when we get to, or nearly the same points on the top, we want to open it to here, the row where the points start, wherever that is. Oh, hello. The way I've drawn it, it's here. So what would happen is you would go up to there. I don't like this. I don't like making a mess. Okay. So you would open the V to there and then go straight up. because I'd rather not have you doing the short row shaping and the V-neck shaping at the same time. If you understand the concept and you want to do the V-neck shaping all the way up to the top, you can, because when we do the short row shaping, this short row at the top, you know, we talked about short rows before. Here's a diagram of short row shaping happening. So when you start short row shaping facing the right side of the work, essentially you're going from one side to the other, but not all the way to the end. And then you're turning and coming back and not going all the way to the end each time. And it creates this shaped top that more closely resembles somebody's shoulders. And so different sizes of the pattern have different amounts of short row shaping, but essentially you start on one side and you work to a few stitches before the end and you turn and go back. And then you work to the same number of stitches before the end and then you turn and you go back. And short rows are just not complete rows worked inside of your item, whatever your item is. So if we were to open this up with a V-neck, when you get to these rows, when you're doing the left front and the right front, you would do them slightly differently. And your short row would be to the neckline and turn. So you would work all the way to the neckline on the left front, and you would turn and go back to the second, the row 2 of your short rows. So row 1 would not stop over here. It would just stop at the neck edge. Right. And row 2 would go back to the first stop for this side. And you would only do the short rows for each side. You wouldn't do both sets of short rows. Does that make sense? Okay, so I didn't want to confuse things by having the short row shaping and the V-neck shaping happening at the same time. So what we're going to talk about is how to start or find your V-neck opening and bring it to the beginning of the short row. And then you just work straight up from there because it's only about 8 rows. And so that will not be a noticeably different angle for most people. And that would be right alongside of their neck. So that's my plan. So the first thing is you need to know the width of this opening. And for example, if it were 9 inches from this side to this side, and this is given in the schematic for each of the sizes. So 9 is one of the possible opening sizes. And let's say you wanted this opening to be about say 10 inches down from here, or 8 inches down from here, or 10, however many, 9, let's say 9 inches. So let's say we wanted to go 9 inches from where this point of the sweater is. So you'd need to just look at a sweater that you have or point to that on yourself with the idea that you're going to be measuring from your sweater. So here's my finished sweater. And I would want to maybe measure on a sweater that I like what the depth of the neckline is from the top of my shoulder. So you need to have some basis for the depth that you're using in your as a comparison, because we're not going to design everything. We're just going to copy from something we already have that's working. So again, the person that we were doing this for this morning needed 10 inches roughly from here to here. And so we marked that on her sweater and we checked where that row was on the side compared to her armhole shaping, and it turned out that it was about an inch above the beginning of the armhole shaping. So she had counted her rows. She knew how many rows to the armhole shaping she had, and then she knew how many rows that the armhole shaping took 2. And she was 2 rows. She had completed the armhole shaping, so she was just above this point when we decided to add her neckline. So that raised the question of, how do you count your rows? And that may seem like a dumb question, but a lot of people in the class didn't really know how to count rows. And I just want to cover very briefly that I count rows on the wrong side of my fabric. I count from the purl side of the fabric, because these rows horizontally are much easier for me to see than on the right side of the fabric. I have a much harder time following rows on the right side than I do on the wrong side. It's just easier for me to see them. Also, I use a knitting needle to be my pointer. And so I can use the knitting needle to really get into these spaces and count as I go up. So I just want to zoom in a little bit if I can. That is not a zoom. A zoom? Does this one not have a zoom? I will zoom the other way. All right. When you're looking at the wrong side of the work, a row is visible between my fingers here, and it looks like a curving line. So I think of a row of stitches as having a smile and a frown, or a canoe and an umbrella, but both of those are part of the row. So it's not just the smile, it's not just the umbrella, it's both of them between my fingernails here. That's the whole row. So if I'm counting, I pick one of those. And for me, I usually pick the smile. I start in a place that is easy to discern. So I might start at the top of my ribbing. So I want to make sure my ribbing is the same, but if I want to count my rows, I often will start above the ribbing, because if I've made sure my ribbing's the same, I don't need to count that too. But if you had to count it, always count from the same place. So if you don't want to count the very cast on edge, you want to count this first smile in the ribbing, then always count the pieces from the same place. So choose your place. It's one up from the edge, and I'm going to count those rows in my ribbing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you can see this is the same row as the one above there. So I have 10 rows in my ribbing. And then starting from here, there's the first smile at the top of my rib. That's where I'm going to start counting the body of my sweater. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. So to me, that's easier to do than trying to count from the right side, where you're just counting the V's. I find that really easy to get off. But you can do it, like, I can't see where the top of the ribbing is as easily. This is just a little murkier to me. And so I like using the purl side for my counting. The other thing I try to do when I'm counting is I try and count on the right side of my right side. So if I'm looking at my fabric, this is the right side of the right hand side of the front face or the public face of my fabric. So that means along the left edge when you turn it to the purl side. And you want to count those rows up to the needle and also, but also stop and count the rows at the armhole shaping. So we want to know how many rows. When we did this in class, we found that we had 90 rows. To the armhole shaping. And we had 2 rows at the armhole shaping and 60 rows above it to the top of the shoulder. And we wanted to make a neckline that dropped down 9 inches from this point. And that we got from measuring a sweater that she was wearing because she wore the sweater that she wanted to copy the neckline of. So we went to her shoulder and we measured down, and we went to here and we measured down. And so it was 9 inches from this point, 9 inches down. And that turned out to be right where she was, which was nice. It was very close to where she was. So we took her actual gauge measurement of 4.94 and we multiplied it times, sorry, it was 9.5 that we did. We multiplied it times 9.5, which is the number of inches of the neckline. And we came out to 46.93 stitches. So we're going to round down to an even number and just go to 46. So this opening is 46 stitches wide. And she had on the needles at the time 126. So that's kind of easy math, right? That means that we are going to have 40 stitches at the top on each side and 46 stitches in between. Now, that's half go to one side and half go to the other. So it's 23 decreased over there and 23 decreased in this direction. So in the row where you're going to begin your shaping, you want to work to the halfway point, in which case that would be 63 stitches over. And then I recommend that you turn and you work one side at a time. So you would just leave these stitches on a holder, on a barber cord, or just on the other side of your circular needle. You don't need to work them at this point. So you would work half of the stitches and you would turn and work back, because on this one, at least, the row to go back is a purl row. We're not going to do any shaping on a purl row. Okay, we're only going to do shaping on a knit row. So on those 63, we're going to, first we're going to split. So we're just going to turn and work back. And that would be, so this was her 92nd row that she was on. So row 93, we would want to work half the stitches. Yep, row 93, we're going to work half the stitches. So we're working half the stitches and turning, leaving remainder on a holder. So this is the split row. Row 94 is this was a right side row. Row 94 is a wrong side row, and all wrong side rows will be the same. So you're going to purl all stitches. So you'll work over to the middle and then you'll purl all the way back. There is no shaping on this side because it's a straight armhole edge. So you don't have to worry about doing any other shaping. So the purl stitches, we're not going to mess with. We're only going to do our shaping on right side rows. So I'm not going to write any more wrong side rows in, but you should remember that those are all even wrong side rows. Okay, so row 95 is the first one that you're going to do a decrease in. So I'm going to just write decrease row. And if I'm doing the decrease row for the left front, it's different than the right front, because when you're knitting across, the decrease is going to happen at the end. But when you're knitting across on the right front, it's going to happen at the beginning. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off the page. So when you're doing the left front, you're going to do your decrease here. And when you're doing the right front, you'll do it at the beginning of the row, which starts at the neck edge. So the decrease row for the left front is the one we're going to do first. And that is whatever your half number of stitches, you're going to work to 4 stitches before the neck edge. And then you're going to do an SSK, which is slip a stitch knitwise, slip another stitch knitwise, and then knit the 2 together. So that decreases by 1. I'm just putting -1 so you remember that that's a decrease. And then you're going to knit the last 2 stitches. So that's your decrease row. It starts at the shoulder edge. There's a decrease here, and then there's 2 more stitches for selvage. On the right front, the decrease row is going to be a little bit different. You're going to knit 2 together, knit to the end. So when you're doing your and the decrease row will start with row 95. So it starts in row 95 for this in this case. So you've worked 93 and you've split, you've purled back, and now in row 95 it's a knit row again, and you're going to start doing the decreases. But how often should you do them? And that was the part that was the fun part of our day-to-day. We figured out get the whole thing in. We figured out that she needed, this is a piece of knitter's graph paper, and one of our class members from the morning is going to see if she can find anybody who has this graph paper anymore. It's Gail Selfridge's Graphit, and it's a pad of graph paper, and you can see that I made a copy of this page from the pad, and that's how I use it. I just make copies from it and I use it for this kind of designing. This is a 5x7 graph paper, and that is the actual gauge of Elaine's sweater. She gets 5 stitches to the inch and 7 rows. And so this graph paper, each of these squares is 1 inch, and it has 5 stitches and 7 rows in the inch. So it's really cool because it gives you the actual measurement that you're making the line of. So this morning we took her measurement and we figured out that this was 9 inches from here to here. Or sorry, this was 60 rows, which is how many rows we had to get through. So remember, we had 60 rows in her sleeve above the 2. And we have 23 stitches. So that was also from here. So 23 stitches to 60 rows. That was our point of reference. So we're trying to do 23 decreases in these 60 rows. So we just drew it out. We counted off the 23 stitches. So from here to here, that's 23. And then we counted up the 60 rows. And that goes to here, that's this line. And then I took a straight edge and I drew the line. And you can see the line that I drew. And then we just did decreases following that line as closely as possible. And those looked like this. I did, so here's the line. And I did the first decrease, the second decrease, the third decrease. I'm still on the left side of the line here. The fourth decrease, the fifth one crosses the line, the sixth one crosses further, the seventh one crosses but stays right on the line. 8, 9, 10 stays on it, but at 11, I would miss the line entirely. So at 11, I go up 2 more rows. And remember, you're going a knit row and up this way and a purl row back. And we're only doing the decreases on the knit row, right? So the first decrease happens on a knit row. And the second row is the purl row back. So there has to be at least 2 rows in the decrease pair. So then in some cases, if you can't make the decrease, you would omit the decrease in this row. You would come back again purlwise, and then you would decrease in the 4th row. So it's not every right side row. This would be every other right side row. And then I started following the line again, and it was 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, but now I needed 4 again. 2, 2, 2, 2, and then I needed 4 again, and then 2, and then I was done. So that looked like this. So we're decreasing 1 stitch at the neck edge on the 2nd row 10 times, 53 stitches remaining from the 63 we started with. So we did one. Right. Yep, 10. So it's the 11th one. So you would starting with row 95, you would do on the 2nd row, every right side row 10 times, and then on the 4th row once, and then the 2nd row 5 times, and then the 4th row once, and then the 2nd row 4 times, the 4th row once, and the 2nd row 1 time. And if you add that up, that's 23 stitches. This is the stitch count as you complete each of those sets of decreases. And it worked out perfectly. It got her right up to 60 stitches or 60 rows. So that's how we did it. And we have this graph paper pad at the store. So you would just need to know your stitch and row gauge. And we could make a copy of this pattern paper and get it to you. We could scan it and send it to you by email, or we can just make a copy for you to draw on if you need. So I'm offering that as a resource if you ever want to make a V-neck. And then what happened, we decided we were going to, get to here. This is row 60. And then at row 60, she would follow the pattern again. For the short rows. And so this is how the short row shaping would look on the left front. So you would knit all the stitches. So that would again be here, knitting all the stitches, all 40. And then you would turn around at the neck edge, which is here, and purl back to 8 or whatever X number before the edge, and then you would do a German short row. There should be a comma there. And then you would turn again, knit 8 or whatever the X number is. I was doing it for her size today, but whatever the turning number is for your size, you would knit that number and place a marker in for your next short row. And then you would continue back to and then you would knit to the end. And then the fourth one would be purl to the marker and do the German short row. So then you would repeat this the same number of times that you did short rows on the back. So that was how we did it. And we're really excited about the opportunity to do that. And I was really sad we couldn't have videoed it this morning. I was like, oh, this would have been great. We could have videoed it, but oh, look at my sleeping baby. He looks like he had a hard day. So that's an example. If you don't want to do a V-neck, the same kind of thing applies. You would figure out how far down, like if you want to do a 2-inch opening on the neck, so then you would figure out how many rows is 2 inches. How wide do you want the opening to be? So let's say that was 4 inches, but then you need to get to, or 6 inches, and then you need to open up a slanted line that's over 2 inches. So you would just draw that picture on the graph paper and figure out how you want to angle the sides of the neckline. The other thing I should point out is my decreases that we showed, just move my camera away, are for fully fashioned decreases. So back on this page, hello, be in focus. My decreases, when you're doing an angle, when you have a neckline, like that, fully fashioning is using the shaping techniques of knitting 2 together or SSK to create a surface detail that is enriching to your overall piece of work. And so in this case, what many designers will do is they will have, instead of having the shaping lean in the same direction as the neckline, they'll have the shaping lean toward the neckline like that. And that's considered full fashioning, I believe. Should probably look it up in the dictionary and make sure I'm saying the right thing. So a left leaning decrease happens on the right leaning edge. So this is a right leaning angle. So I'm using a left leaning decrease. And so then we would switch and do a right leaning decrease on the left leaning angle. So what that looked like in my notes was an SSK is a left leaning decrease, and a knit two together is a right leaning decrease. So that's why I used those two different ones in that order. If you were not doing a V-neck, then you would, like I said, you'd want to have you'd want to figure out where you want that to come to and how far down. That's essentially what a crew neck looks like. So in that case, you would need to know the number of stitches or the number of inches times your gauge. You'd need to know how many stitches. So I'm above my line here. You'd need to know how many stitches were on the needle, and you'd want to subtract. So this would give you the number of stitches. And that would be either a bind off, or these would be stitches left on a holder. And then it would be the same thing for the slope of the line on either side, because it's the same kind of a triangle that you'd be decreasing stitches over rows. It just would be much shallower. So that's how I calculate a neckline. Any questions? Oop.
You really get down in the weeds in that stuff.
I do.
Oh, man, very nice.
Thank you. This was the front. So again, if you're not doing any alterations, the front and the back are exactly the same. And I think that the top of the front is really, I think that the neckline is going to be really nice. I'm excited about by it. So if you don't want to change it, if you don't want to have an opening, I like a mock neck. I don't know how high up on your neck you went on your sweater, Paula, but I'm really excited about how this is going to look and how snuggly and warm this is going to be. What I would like to do next time, and I told this to the class this morning, was I would like to demonstrate blocking on our fronts and our backs. So at least have one of them done so that you can block it along with along with me. But I'd like to demonstrate blocking, and then we're going to just talk a little bit about the sleeves, because the sleeves are essentially just a trapezoid. You're just starting with a few stitches and increasing on the sides and then binding on, and that's it. That's all the sleeve is. It's not, and there's two of them. We're only going to take 1 month to do the sleeves, but in the meantime, I want to show you how to block and then have you block all your pieces. So next month is blocking and sleeves. And then that's October. November will be doing the shoulders with a 3-needle bind off, and hopefully doing the collar. And then December will be joining the sleeves and seaming under the arms and under the side of the sweater. And the thing about seaming is that's all the different ways you can do the mattress stitch. When you put when you have something that's in, when you have the top of a shoulder, that's rows to rows, which is why we can do a 3-needle bind. And also we did the short rows. So we can do the 3-needle bind off because we have live stitches, and we can do 1 stitch to 1 stitch to 1 stitch to 1 stitch and bind them off together and have this nice, super strong shoulder seam. And that's going to be really nice. It's going to look really cool. But when you're doing the side of a sweater, typically you've got rows on the front and the back, and the top of your stitches, I'm going in the wrong direction, but the top of the stitches of the sleeve, it's each stitch going into those rows. So you're doing stitches to rows. And as you saw from the graph paper, stitches and rows are not the same width or height. So stitches are wider than they are tall. Yes. So there was 5 stitches to an inch versus 7 stitches, 7 rows to an inch, which means that you would want to do a little bit of jiggering on that. You'd want to figure what, how many stitches. So usually it's like 3 to 4, 3 stitches to every 4 rows. That's often the math that we use, but it could be a little bit, it could be a combination of other things depending on what your gauge actually comes out to be. But we usually start with 3 rows, 3 stitches to every 4 rows. And then when you do rows to rows, it's the same as when you do stitch to stitch. That's the same, but it looks different. And so I'm going to demonstrate all 3 of those mattress stitch techniques on the video so that you'll be able to do rows to rows, stitches to stitches, stitches to rows. And then you'll be done. And then the piece will already have been blocked. It can be steamed or blocked again after you've done all of the finishing work, just because sometimes this, you know, it's like when you make something that you sew, you press your seams. And so when you make something that you knit, it's like the final part of it to make it look nice. Like when I finished this, it was a crumpled mess. And now it's all smooth.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I really like it.
Wow. Is it gray?
It's a gray green.
Okay, because when you had it down by the camera, it looked chartreuse.
Yeah, it's much greener. But this camera does not pick up the color. You know, it's funny. It doesn't pick up the colors in the same way. Okay, the end. Is that clear as mud for everybody? So the next assignment is to get your pieces done. The front and the back's done.
Yes.
And be ready to block them next month. And then that'll only take 1 day. That's not going to take a month to do. And then in the rest of the month, you're going to be working on getting both sleeves alike and the length that you want. And I may alter my sleeve a little bit. I've made my body wider, and so I may make my sleeve shorter to compensate for that. And so I will talk about shortening the sleeve or lengthening the sleeve, which is very similar to what we just did in the
math.
It's math. It's slope of a line.
Yeah.
The only part of algebra that you need in knitting is the slope of a line.
Oh, cool.
All right. Any questions? Do you love the sleeping dog in my ear?
Oh, she is so adorable.
He's a boy. He likes the Barbie movie, and so he wanted to wear.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Tebow. Yep. I knew you were a boy.
He's a boy dog.
I see pink, I say she.
I know. Everybody does. Okay. In that case, I'm going to let everybody go have the rest of their evening. I've so enjoyed this. I hope that you liked it and that you feel confident that you can alter your sweater if you want to.
Very good. Very good.
Thanks, guys.
We're turning into